Well, welcome back and thank you for staying with Morning Express. We definitely appreciate your presence right here. We continue taking a look at the latest matters bedeviling the country, policy-wise and politics-wise. But let's start with the judicial arm of the government due to that bumper that's just ran, where the recruitment interviews for Kenya's next Chief Justice actually continue today, where the last 5 candidates, including Senior Counsel Fred Ngatia and Court of Appeal President William Ouko, are set to face the interview panel this week. So, what internal and external political factors surround this process, and what lessons can be drawn from previous exercises that piqued Maraga and his predecessor, Willy Mutunga? KTN senior political reporter Murimi Mwangi interrogates on House of Cards. Take a look.
Judges Said Chitembwe, Martha Koome and Mareta Njage, as well as former Director of Public Prosecutions Philip Murgor and law scholar Professor Kamerimbote have already appeared before the Judicial Service Commission interview panel. Next in the hot seat is High Court Judge Nduma Nderi, followed by President Uhuru Kenyatta's former lawyer, Senior Counsel Fred Ngatia, Appellate Court President William Ouko, law scholar Professor Wekesa Moni, and lawyer Aliciano.
Once we finish the interview process and we transmit the reports, we become functus officium. We have done our bit. Once we have done our bit, we expect that other agencies will do their bit.
But what internal and external politics is at play in the recruitment of Maraga's successor?
What others have done.
Perhaps most outstanding are competing interests of different constituencies. JSC commissioners represent on the recruitment panel. Among these is the critical group of senior judicial staff, such as judges and magistrates, who will directly report up the hierarchy to whoever becomes CJ, and whose interests are represented in the JSC by Commissioners Evelyn Olwande and Justices David Majanja, Mohamed Warsame and Acting Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu. Kenya, the other block of interests in the JSC being commissioners perceived to be directly linked to the executive, either by mandate or virtue of the appointing authority. Among these are Attorney General Kihara Kariuki, Public Service Commission representative to the JSC Patrick Gichohi, and General Public Representatives to the Commission Professor Olive Mugenda and Felix Koskei. All of this individually picked by President Kenyatta.
The president may have an interest in who becomes the next CJ. And if he has that interest will be articulated by people from his region in that commission. So it's a perception. It's a perception that the commission must work hard to overcome.
Kenyans should not live in the past. We should not worry so much about what are the political interests. Honestly, there can be no other way. There are interests at home, interests at church, interests in the mosques. There are interests always. Even who is going to be our sheikh? People want to know.
Yet the process comes against the backdrop of frosty relations between the judiciary and the Kenyatta administration, following the annulment of the 2017 presidential election by the Supreme Court. Analysts argue that power brokers behind the Kenyatta succession battle now more than ever before have a keen interest in crafting a friendlier Supreme Court bench.
We should give strict adherence to merit. Somebody who goes to that office should have no reproach. He should be beyond reproach. He should be a person who should stand out and all Kenyans will be comfortable.
In order to maintain the unity of the state, these appointments will be able to reflect the face of Kenya, so that Kenyans, whether from all walks of the world, know that anybody from Lokichogio to Busia can also occupy this position. So I think the issue of regional balance, ethnic balance is important.
The process of recruiting chief justices under the 2010 Constitution has proven to be always politically charged. In 2011, retired President Mwai Kibaki's unilateral attempt to pick then appellate judge Al-Nashir Visram as Chief Justice flopped. The JSC subsequently settled on former activist Willy Mutunga as Chief Justice, a choice analysts argue was largely propelled by the winds of change, following promulgation of the 2010 Constitution that rejuvenated the civil society and breathed a new life to the judiciary. Yet the process leading to Mutunga's retirement ahead of the 2017 polls was not as smooth. First came an attempt by the state to fix the retirement age of judges hired prior to the 2010 Constitution at 74, 4 years above the constitutional age of 70, a scheme that would have allowed then Deputy Chief Justice Kalpana Rawal and Justice Philip Tunoi to serve past the 2017 polls. This also flopped. Then came the controversial petition from the Office of the Attorney General through then Solicitor General Njemu Turi that sought to compel the JSC to submit the names of 3 nominees of CJ to the President, who would eventually pick one. A petition that faced strong rebellion from the JSC and legal experts, leading to its swift withdrawal.
David Kenani Maraga.
Opinion is still divided to date about JSC choice of Maraga for CJ in 2016. Some insiders claim he might have been the compromise candidate of the government and opposition factions in the commission, his performance at the interview notwithstanding. All politics, they say, is local, but the administrative experience and jurisprudential competence of the applicants notwithstanding, external political players are certainly all eyes as the Maraga succession continues. Murumi Mwangi, KTN News in Nairobi.
Well, definitely a lot of intrigues, even as the second week of the clamor to replace the former Chief Justice David Maraga continues. Public interviews rather, by the JSC are conducted as from 9 a.m. and we expect Judge Nduma Nderi rather to make his way today as from 9 a.m. But that's the latest in terms of these intrigues, and we want to take a look at a couple of issues bedeviling the interviews. Allow me to reintroduce my guest joining us via way of Zoom, Stephen Mwakesi, who's a public policy analyst. In studio, Dr. Njogu Barua, who's a former Gishugu Member of Parliament, as well as Arthur Odera, who's joining us in studio, former Teso North Member of Parliament. I'd like to begin with you, Dr. Njogu, quite briefly, because earlier on we were discussing about intrigues around the education sector. Perhaps your points on that, but around this, your take so far. 5 judges down. We have 5 more applicants to go in terms of the hot seat. What observations have you noted as far as the JSC interviews are concerned?
Thank you very much. Yes, and the first thing I've noted is that there are very many sectors who have an interest in the outcome of this process. It has been clearly stipulated by the people who have commented on the screen. We have the political sector, we have got the legal fraternity, and other people are interested in this process. On the issues which have also been raised, the issue of competence, face of Kenya, objectivity, and so forth. Starting from the face of Kenya, I would like to say that this was a publicly advertised position, and everybody from any part of the community who was eligible had an access to a chance to apply for the position. So far, I think you've got about 10 or so, yes. About 10 people who are going through this interview, and even if you assume that each one of them come from a single ethnic community, it means that you're about 32 ethnic communities will not be represented in this competition. So in terms of face of Kenya, we are going to get the face of Kenya based on those who have applied. So you're going to get one of the 10 people is an Chief Justice. The other aspect I'd like to point out is that one of the qualities of a Chief Justice, from experience, both as a Member of Parliament and outside the Parliament, is that you need somebody who is actually competent in implementing, in actually interpreting the law and being fair to all sectors. And competence is very important, and you have seen how people have performed, all the way from Marete to Madakome, others are coming, and the fact that we are having public interviews, it means that the public is also getting a chance to interview through remote or to observe the performance of various candidates. Okay. So what public expects is that the person who will be appointed, nominated, appointed finally, should largely fulfill the expectation of the larger population. The third aspect is that as a Chief Justice, we need a Chief Justice who will be able to negotiate with other sectors, because the judiciary is one of the three arms of government, the other one being the executive and the judiciary. So when it comes to the judiciary and the legislature, the Chief Justice and his team must have the skills to negotiate and converse with the legislature in as far as funding as financing is concerned. We don't expect to have somebody who is so arrogant who expect financing as funding as a right. Oh, it's a right, of course, but you have to be able to negotiate your way out because the resources are limited. So negotiation skills, okay, and also relationship with the other heads of the other two executive arms will be very important. It is also critical to know that the Chief Justice should exercise his independence or her independence, okay, but as much as you exercise your independence is a matter of give and take. So how you relate to the head of state is also critical. How you relate with parliament is critical. And this comes to the issue of the interest of the political wing, arm of government, on the outcome of the Chief Justice. Right now we have a president who is actually exiting. In the next few months, he will have retired according to the Constitution. So it's also of interest for him to get somebody who can be able to, in my view, who can be able to carry on his legacy, who can be able to carry on with what he had started. So the president and his team have also an interest in the outcome of this process, because after that, they expect a fair bench, okay, which you address justice equally.
And we might understand the interest of the political space in terms of who is the next CJ due to the work cut out for them come the 2022 general election. But Arthur Odera, we're speaking about interest right now, and this should definitely not cloud the judgment of the JSC panel in picking the suitable names to occupy the position of the Chief Justice, because the President will have the final say at the end of the day. Talk to us about interest from the political point of view, from the Kenyans' point of view, because this is a public interview. It's definitely playing out to the public gallery. What interest might Kenyans be having, especially when it comes to the next Chief Justice?
Thank you very much, Jesse. May I make a short comment about education, as proposed that we should have an education system where there are no boarding secondary schools. I remember when I joined secondary school from having done my primary exams, I traveled 450 kilometers to attend boarding school in my school of choice. If you limit, essentially saying there are no boarding schools limits geographically where the student can go. After the sessional paper number 10 of 1965, development was focused on areas that were seen to be of the highest potential. How potential was defined then was based more on the political interest of the elite that existed, especially in government then. In essence, what ended up happening is that a lot of geographical areas in Kenya were disadvantaged in terms of the development of education, education infrastructure, education culture, tradition, and enough role models that will drive and pave the way and blaze the trail for young people who are committed to getting an education. If you limit to day schools, you are disadvantaging probably 90% of the Kenyan population in terms of getting quality education. Number two, based on the principles of the Constitution and the spirit that we Kenyans have been talking about for a long time, that we are committed to a spirit of diversity. In any case, if we are talking about one nation, Kenya, it can only exist as a nation if we embrace diversity fully. Diversity in terms of faith, diversity in terms of ethnicity, geographical origin, creed, anything. And therefore, for these children, because education goes to mostly the young, if you limit them geographically, you are limiting them to things they know and they grow up knowing those things and living like that, and therefore they will never be able to interact fully and meaningfully with other communities. That aside, coming to the judiciary, we need to look at the judiciary as a service provider. Who does the judiciary provide services to? Those who seek justice in the courts of law, those who need services of the judiciary, whatever those services may be. And therefore, if you take a service provider point of view, who then should define what is a satisfactory product of that service provider? Shouldn't that be the consumer? It should be the consumer. The consumer is the test, the acid test of whether that product is satisfactory or not. It can't be the provider. Therefore, if you take that point of view, you then begin to think, why do we need a magistrate and 3 judges in the Judicial Services Commission? There's absolutely no justification. It's overdone. What does that end up doing? The likely outcome of that is that you then have judicial products. A product, take the Chief Justice to be a product of that Judicial Service Commission, who is internally focused, a product of an insular view of the judiciary, and therefore someone who will protect the interest of the judiciary rather than render services to Kenyans as desired. You find a judge of the appeal, or court of appeal, a judge of the High Court, a judge of the Supreme Court, and a magistrate. That is grossly overdone. There is the business sector, which would need representation. The faiths would need representation. The youth would need representation. The women, somebody who just represents the women's challenges, the women's views vis-a-vis the services offered by the, and I could go on and on and on. You then begin to wonder then, how did we end up constituting a Judicial Services Commission that is so insular? And if you take the judges and magistrates away, you end up with a lot of other lawyers who are players in the judicial system. We need to relook our Judicial Service Commission and look at it as a service provider rather than a cohort of professional colleagues who have the same interest and therefore will seek to protect that interest. I also got the impression last week, and this was shared by a lot of other people, that you would see that the certain commissioners were having a go at certain candidates in a way that makes you think, oh, what's that about? That aside, they say if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, then surely it must be a duck. For me, the duck, one of the ducks, is that none of the sitting Supreme Court judges applied to be considered for the post of Chief Justice. Yeah. It walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it reinforces the view that is popular in certain quarters that there is a predetermined candidate. Is there? I do not know. But the taste of the pudding is in the eating. If there was a more diverse Judicial Services Commission, maybe it would have been a little more difficult to influence them and have them share a view about a preferred candidate. And let me leave it at that.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Stephen Mwakesi, do you hold the same opinion? Do we need to relook at the Judicial Service Commission, one or the other, but also give us your take, your intrigues? 5 candidates so far. What stood out for you? Were there personal issues played out during the public interviews, according to you?
Jesse, thank you. I think for me, when I look at this particular issue of the appointment of the Chief Justice, there is something that I think we need to be very clear about. This is a very important job in our democracy. It is another arm of government, and it has a very particular role of dispensing justice for the people of Kenya, and especially following the letter of the law. And this is why I'm very particular when I say that we need to actually have people who understand the law, how it works, and how it is actually formulated, and how it is actually dispensed in terms of administration of justice, be the people who choose who should be the Chief Justice. Because the role of the Chief Justice is a very complex one. One is you're a Supreme Court judge, so you're meant to actually be able to understand, interpret, and be able to look at different circumstances, the reality of the day, and be able to dispense what we call the jurisprudence of the nation with regard to particular issues of the day. So you will have to have some of the greatest minds sitting at that particular panel of judges that is called the Supreme Court. And so it's very important that we do first have somebody who is extremely competent on the law and how it is applied. Secondly, there is the other job of being the president of the Supreme Court. And this job is a highly administrative job. It means it requires his ability to create leadership and lead from the front other judicial officers and even court users, this being the lawyers and also the people who are coming to seek justice from the courts. So it is a leadership position as well. So it demands that the holder of that position is able to earn and command the respect of his peers and also other leaders of the two other arms of government, that is Parliament and also the executive. Now, looking at this particular circumstance, it's very important that I would agree that we should have a JSC as it is constituted now. I wouldn't go with the opinion that has been given by Mheshimiwa here that we should really open it up to a diversity of persons to see how they can be able to appoint who should be the next Chief Justice. It's very important that the lawyers themselves, the advocates, the judges, the magistrates are able to be confident that the person who is supposed to be leading this institution is somebody who's placed there because of merit and it has been chosen by people who have undergone this particular circumstance of being able to choose who they are. But the public is also represented. We have former Commissioner Koskei, and we also have Olive Mugenda there representing generally the public. And so I think for me, when I look at it, I believe that we should go with persons who are able to get the respect and command the respect of the peers in the profession of law. Secondly, I think the part that is even most important is the administration of justice, the part whereby this is a leader who can be able to command respect amongst his peers. And this is what comes to the politics of the game. And that's why you find immediately after the JSC comes up with the shortlist or the persons who they recommend to be able to become the Chief Justice, that name is taken to Parliament for consideration. And this is where the politics of the day are able to interrogate and see, is this person fit and does he meet the requirements we need as a country to be able to be appointed as the Chief Justice. And Parliament will have a very big say in this. I do not believe that it can be a simple sanitization that what Uhuru Kenyatta wants is what he will get. I think there will be a serious trade-off between the parties. Raila Odinga will have a stake. So will all the other presidential contenders, because remember, as president of the Supreme Court, there is a very important function that they do, and this is a consideration of the presidential election results. So I think the politics will be allowed to play, and they will have their day to be scrutinized by the public through the parliamentary committee. And then finally, the president will have to select somebody who can be able to take care of this nation going forward. So for me, I am still confident that there is a lot that needs to be done. The fact that other Supreme Court judges have not been able to put in the application does not mean that there is a problem with that particular seat. It means they do not want to take on an additional responsibility because it's not an easy job. And that's why you find even that particular position of Chief Justice, you can hold it for only 10 years. You cannot do it beyond that. So the importance of it is that people who feel that they are not capable enough to hold that position of Chief Justice, they will tend to shy off and allow somebody else who believes that they are more qualified to do it to actually step in. And there's a lot of work to be undertaken in that particular position. That granted, I'm looking forward to this week's meetings because I believe I have not yet come across the high level of standard, especially people who have a clear knowledge of the inner workings of the judiciary, because we need a cogent administrator when it comes to management of the JSC and also the Supreme Court and also the Council for Administration of Justice. So that person will probably emerge. I liked what I saw from Justice Martha Koome. She was quite very clear. I'm not so confident with the other people who were able to raise different issues during the last week's interviews, but I'm confident that by the end of this week, we shall be able to have a clear picture of what we should expect as our new Chief Justice going forward.
Well, well noted, Mwakesi. Let's cross over to Dr. Njogu. Perhaps your final take on this matter as we cross over to politics now. Yeah.
Yes, I think I personally want to side with Mwakesi. And I think Judicial Service Commission, as current constituted, can produce a very competent Chief Justice, and I'm sure the way it is constituted, it can be objective in its approach and get the best qualified person for that office. However, I still believe that there's still room for improvement to get to get a better representation in terms of compensation. My comment I have is that it's important for Kenyans are curious to understand why all the sitting members of the Supreme Court, none of them fronted themselves for consideration for that position. Yeah. I think it's important, even after this exercise is completed, for a research to be done to know exactly what is there, which is not making these guys, men and women, not motivated to go the next level. We know, of course, human needs are hierarchically arranged. So the direct thing I expect from a Supreme Court judge is to apply for the next high job, which is either the DCJ or the Chief Justice. This is a case whereby you have got the DCJ, who is not ambitious to become the CJ, and is very comfortable to actually participate in an interview for her own successor. Okay. So is it that the current members of the Supreme Court have issues which may make them unqualified or unfit for that office, which they don't want the public to know? That's something I would like us to know as members of the public, okay. Because very curious that, like now, DP Ruto, it will be very unlikely for him not to front himself for the next office, because that's the only remaining office. So we should know, we should be told as Kenyans, why are these Supreme Court judges not offering themselves for consideration for the next level? What is hindering them? What is making them feel unsuitable for that office?
Well, you brought in the example of DP Ruto. Well, there are deputy presidents who didn't want to go for presidency. Mudi Awori, just to mention a few. But as we put this matter to rest, Arthur Odera, that issue about none of the Supreme Court judges putting their name up for consideration, Mwakesi put in a fact of perhaps they didn't want additional responsibilities. How do you counter that?
That's laughable. Yes. Anybody would know that a judge of the Supreme Court, you cannot get there without being ambitious in the first place. Some of them have come through the system, from magistrates to High Court to Court of Appeal. Some of them, before the new constitution, might have reached their apex at the Court of Appeal before the Supreme Court was created, but then the opportunity presented itself, they applied, were interviewed and selected, and they joined the Supreme Court. A lot of these judges, if you look at them, I mentioned them. I talked about this again some time back, and I mentioned some of the names. I don't want to go through that again. They're fairly young in the scheme of things, given the retirement age of 70 now in the Constitution. They're fairly young. They're fairly ambitious. They're well educated. From the things they do and the way they do them, you can tell that these are people who have risen through the ranks, and I'm not sure that they are seeing a glass ceiling in terms of access to being CJ in the Republic of Kenya. And if you listen to what happens in the corridors, you know that the vast majority of them would have been interested in being the Chief Justice in the Republic of Kenya. The big question is, why is it that they did not apply? And for me, it is a duck, because it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. I think the perception is that it's a fait accompli.
Okay, that's interesting. Stephen Mwakesi, perhaps let me shift your focus right now. I want to interrogate issues around the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission just briefly. According to today's dailies, there's a fresh scheme to kick out Chebukati and the other commissioners, the other sitting commissioners, once the 4 vacant positions have been filled. Well, what's your take on this? Because a lot of emphasis has been put on electoral reforms, especially ahead of the 2022 general election, bearing in mind some of the issues that bedeviled the commission from the 2017 election. What's your take on this?
Jesse, for me, I was quite disappointed with how we as a country are dealing with the issue of elections and appointment of very strategic offices in this particular country. We read the Kriegler Commission report that is very clear that we need to really prepare adequately and in advance for any coming election. But now here we are, less than 15 months to the next election, and now is when we're looking at filling up a vacancy that's been there for almost a year and a half, where commissioners had already resigned. And now is when we're declaring a vacancy and now setting up a selection committee, which will now be able to now present names to the president. Now, I think for me, we are really playing with fire. And it's important that we get down to taking matters of the election absolutely more seriously than we are right now. The issue of trying to remove Chebukati is quite moot. And I think because if that was the intention and it was read a long time ago by whoever is planning whatever they're scheming towards 2022, that such a move would be countered well in advance, because should have the 4 positions been filled earlier on and in advance, then the move to remove Chebukati would have been quite a viable option. But now we are at the very tail end and just nearing a new election. I doubt that they'll be able to effectively execute on removal of Chebukati. But then again, this is Kenya. Anything is possible. There are a lot of dreamers when it comes to how people are scheming towards 2022. So anything is possible. But for me, I think going forward, as a country, we need to take this matter seriously. We should never be in such a position whereby we have an important commission being run by only 3 members when it's meant to be constituted of 7 members. And then now, at the very tail end is when we're looking at filling up this particular position. We should not be taking such a matter casual as we are right now.
Okay, Arthur, what's your take on this? Because others might argue if we're truly aiming for proper reforms at the Commission, we shouldn't go for the commissioners. We should be looking to fix the structural challenges that seem too obvious going into elections. What's your take on this?
I think there's a close relationship, Jesse, between structural setups, systems, and the leadership and the people who manage those systems to deliver the service required to the citizenry of Kenya. And I must say that we need to reach a point in our Kenyan governance culture where we have a system of assessing people's performance over time once we've selected them, have an objective system of assessing performance, and let people continue in office or remove them from office based on an objective criteria that is set up, it is known, and it's objectively assessed, and it is transparently communicated to the general public so that people know that so-and-so is being removed from office based on underperformance or based on non-performance. So unless you assess Chebukati's performance and his team and say they delivered on this, they failed on this, and overall their mark is 20% or 40%, it's very difficult because we have allowed politics to permeate every aspect of our lives. Whether we remove people, whether we appoint people or remove them from office is based on political considerations. No wonder that the things that are important to the lives of Kenyans in terms of delivering service, a lot of them go wrong because the initial considerations are political, the continuation considerations are political, and the removal considerations are also political. How on earth can we expect delivery of service in such an environment?
Well, critical questions right there. But according to the proponents of this particular proposal, they will actually back their case with some of the issues that were highlighted by the PAC committee, the Public Accounts Committee, that indicted the commissioners in terms of investigations against the commissioners over alleged conflict of interest in the procurement of electoral equipment at inflated cost in respect to the 2017 general election. But be that as it may, Dr. Njogu, many might argue, especially this commissioners, that this might be a witch hunt. But Kenyans will definitely ask, then, what's the role of the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020? Because that's when we expected reforms at the commission to be effected. What do you read out of this?
First of from where I sit, if I were Mr. Chebukati, I would not have offered myself for consideration. I would have just stepped aside. For one reason, he has already supervised 2 elections in 1 year. That's the general election and the repeat election. Okay. And there are some controversies that have arisen from that. So I say, from where I sit, I would not have offered myself for consideration. So the people who are actually moving to push for a replacement of Chebukati. I think they are, to me, they are in a good place. They are coming with from a good position, and should move along with it.
Okay.
Secondly, I think, in my own view, instead of the biggest issue facing this country is the electoral justice system, fixing the electoral justice system. If you fix the electoral justice system so that you can ensure that there are fair elections, both from county ward level to presidential level, all these things being fronted by BBI can be solved.
Okay.
All these controversies come because of disputing presidential election results and other positions. So if you can fix it and ensure that there is transparency at all levels of election, this country will have peace, and there will be no this recurrent violence after every 5 years people are talking about will be a thing of the past. So what am I saying? I'm saying that when you come to fill these positions, first and foremost should replace the entire commission and replace the new one, which we expect to be more objective. We should be able to fill it with men and women of integrity, men and women who are not going to be moved by political interest or any other form of interest.
Okay.
These are men and women whose interest will be just to preside over free and fair elections. So what I know is that in these appointments, especially for commissions, and there are many commissions in this country,
yeah,
I would like to state that from my own personal point of view, representing myself, I know I have a feeling that some commissioners have not been appointed based on merit. Their appointments have been based on other interests. Some of them are rewards. Others are interests of securing certain outcomes in the future.
Okay.
So the objectivity in the appointment of these commissioners is going to be key in the continued peace of this country.
All right.
So in as far as I'm concerned, if you can fix the electoral justice system, and then you entrench, respect the Constitution,
okay,
we'll be able to not even need a BBI at all.
Well, a lot needs to be done, especially in the journey towards electoral reforms. But let's shift focus. Just briefly, Stephen Mwakesi, I mean, if we leave politics to politicians, we know what might happen. So I want your take on the latest developments around political intrigues. Number one, the dailies are reporting on a pre-election pact meeting where members of parliament are in night talks to craft a Ruto deal centered on economic and political demands. But not just that. Page 10 of the Standard highlights plans to crowd the 2022 presidential race and force a runoff. What's your take on all this with respect to clamor around the 2022 general election? Quite briefly, sir.
Rogers, first I want to just make a quick comment. I am grateful that the Deputy President took it upon himself last week to make clear that he has no pre-election pact with Raila Odinga. And I think that was very important to clear the air, because already there was a lot of muddying of the waters in central Kenya. And it's not even surprising that following that particular interview, there's been a lot of activity in Mount Kenya region whereby members of parliament have been meeting to discuss what is it that they are going to get from a William Ruto candidature and the presidency, and especially to be able to see if they can be able to lock in the DP slot and also be able to gain economic advantage that comes from being a part and parcel of the winning formula. Remember, out of the IBC tabulations, the Kikuyu vote and the larger Mount Kenya vote is quite significant, almost numbering to about 6 million on its own. So that is the prime number that everybody is looking forward to. And I think anybody who is looking to make a formidable bid towards the 2022 election, if they're able to really bag that Mount Kenya region vote, then I believe every machination that somebody might want to anticipate to be able to do a runoff might be faltered. And these are the mechanics that anyone who's planning to do the looking at towards creating a runoff by fielding as many candidates as possible might actually be lost out on. So I think in as much as there are people who are really scheming to have a runoff, I believe also on the side of William Ruto or even Raila Odinga or whoever, One Kenya Alliance, the most important strategy and strategy number one is to win on round one. To put all your eggs in a basket that is projecting towards a runoff will be like what was being anticipated in 2013, where everybody assumed that there was no likely way that the Jubilee coalition or the CORD coalition could be able to garner 50+1. So I think it's important that as the coalitions are scheming towards 2022, they look at the numbers properly. They do not underestimate the fact that it is possible to win at round one. And the feeling of necessary candidates in the name of creating confusion. Kenyans are a bit wiser now. They know what they're supposed to be looking forward to when it comes to 2022. So let's not be presumptuous about how Kenyans will be leaning towards 2022.
Okay, interesting takes right there. Now, Dr. Njogu, I'd like to begin with you because there are a lot of intrigues around central Kenya, just as Mwakesi mentioned, and this pre-election pact seems to angle what benefits the people of Mount Kenya might receive in terms of a position, if it's the DP in Ruto's camp, as well as the economic demands they have for the Mount Kenya region. Talk to us about this, because there's so much clamor around the region. Well, what's your take on this, briefly?
Yeah, I think politics about deal making, especially when it comes to the macro level, that's the national level. I think the way I interpret this news item is that these night meetings, they call them night talks, but we actually also talk during the day, actually, not only at night. But I would like to say that this is a discussion. It's another level. It's a discussion which is actually implying there's competition among many leaders in Central Province, so that they can be able to identify one of them who can be appointed as William Ruto's running mate.
Okay.
So it is not admitting to say that we have disengaged with the deputy president. I mean, I'm saying, by me, I mean the region, not me as a person. It's not admitting to imply that there's a disengagement with William Ruto. What I suspect is that there is a competition among the top Mount Kenya leaders on who is better placed to represent the region in terms of economic agenda and the political agenda. Then after that will be over. They will front him to the deputy president, him or her the deputy president for running mate. The other thing I would like to say is that it is also important that the deputy president clarify that he's not having a coalition agreement with the Raila Odinga. But from where I sit, I don't think that discussion is completely off the table. But the issue is, at what level do we discuss with Raila Odinga? The only level we can discuss with Raila Odinga is when you are fixed. First of all, the region has fixed that the candidate in UDA is going to be deputy president. Once they fix who will be the running mate from Mount Kenya region, as Mwakesi has put there 6 million votes, if you don't get a running mate from Central Kenya, you start a big chance of losing that vote. Then, and maybe if the BBI passes, they also settle on who can be the prime minister. Then at the lower levels, they can discuss the ODM if they're so interested. That's the thing. The other issue is that people from Mount Kenya, very briefly, people from Mount Kenya have really learned from what the president is doing. Because the president was elected together with Deputy President William Ruto. After 2017, Ruto is like irrelevant. He's like a man at the house arrest. So there's also a school of thought that Mount Kenya may support or will support Deputy President, and some of them are feeling that let's support him from a different platform, so that we can have the 2013 relationship where we had TNA and URP.
Allow me to pick Arthur Odera's comments right now. Quite briefly, sir, even as there's clamor around positions and economic benefits, there's those of the school of thought that this might be a crowded out race come 2022 in order to lock out that particular threshold that is needed. As you give us your final take, talk to us about the philosophies behind these political realignments and coalitions. What's your take on it?
Jesse, I like the fact that the Mount Kenya leaders are caucusing and discussing political and economic interests of the region. Before you even talk about alliances, take a look at that as an input into a process of service delivery for anybody who becomes president or prime minister or minister or any leader within a sitting government. It is an important input, and I can tell you for sure, when you talk about interest, what really is interest? Break down interest from the national level to the regional level, to the family level, to the personal level, to the village level. It ends up being economic in large part. So these leaders, what really binds them is not so much the fact that they are Kikuyu or Embu or Meru. It's a lot more about economic interest. They are tied together by similar economic interest. Tea, coffee, small business, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And it dovetails into the political arena, because politics, the way by which you seek to achieve those economic interests. And I think if every region needs to do that, every region that's bound by similar economic interests needs to do that, so that that economic interest can be addressed. And usually, the economic interest is, because of the geography, ends up looking like the ethnic. But the big question, Jesse, is this. Mount Kenya is caucusing. They say they are caucusing to see what demands they will make on the deputy president so as to support him. Will those demands be open to delivery by every other presidential candidate that's available? And that's a critical question. That is probably something we need to keep an eye on going forward, because I told you initially, I think it was last week I mentioned in this forum that Mount Kenya will be looking for the best deal. So it is an interesting area we need to keep looking at.
Okay, we'll definitely continue monitoring the political developments in the country, not just in Mount Kenya region, but the country in entirety. Many thanks for your contribution, gentlemen. Arthur Dera joining us, former Teso North Member of Parliament, right here in studio. Always appreciate your input. Aloysa Njogu Barua, Daktari, we appreciate your input right here, former Geshugu Member of Parliament. And we're joined via way of Zoom by Stephen Mwakesi, who is a public policy analyst. Well, gentlemen, allow us to take a short break for our viewers. When we come back, it's all about the newsroom, where we focus on the safety of journalists, which is the ability for journalists and media professionals to receive, produce and share information without facing physical or moral threats. Now, journalists often face violence and intimidation for exercising their fundamental rights to freedom of expression. And the Media Council of Kenya aims to create a free and safe environment for journalists and media workers, both in conflict and non-conflict situations. And a new identification press kit for scribes has been launched by the media regulator. We'll be joined by Victor Bwire, who's the Director of Media Training and Development at the Media Council, for this and much more. Stay with us.